Hello, welcome to Life from Above. My name is David Kenny. Glad you could watch the program, be with us today. We're interviewing candidates for graduation from the West Virginia School of Preaching, and today I'm interviewing Caleb McAnulty, and want to welcome to the program. Welcome to the show, Caleb.
Thank you.
What we're doing is asking some basic questions, but I want to start out with a piece that Andy Robinson wrote about the graduates, and this is in Publishing Piece, which is the school's newsletter. And let me read you a little bit what Andy, the director of the school, wrote about Caleb. He says, while at West Virginia School of Preaching, Caleb has shown a good base of knowledge in the Bible and related topics. Caleb is a bright young man with the potential to use his talents for the Lord in years to come, and we wish him the very best. Caleb is one of the students I had at the Future Preacher Training Camp at Alkire Road in Grove City, Ohio. And I really enjoyed having him for a student, and I know he is very studious and very smart because he scores the top of the classes. So it's really good to have you here, Caleb. Let me ask you, why did you decide to go to the West Virginia School of Preaching? You obviously have a lot of academic potential. What drew you to go there?
Really, the lack of knowledge about the Bible was my main issue. Just a lot of people, even in the Brotherhood, don't seem to have a good foundation of knowledge, and I wanted to be able to help fix that. And I figured that my best course of action was to go to a school of preaching, and I knew several of the the teachers who taught at the school, the West Virginia School of Preaching. So it was my first choice.
Now, your father's a preacher. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your dad?
Well, he's a minister for the Chapel Hill Church of Christ currently. He's been involved in several works at the Fort Hill Church Camp. And he was part of the reason that I decided to become a preacher, because I want to say, got used to the life of a minister, but it's always appealed to me, the lifestyle that we sort of had, and the more flexibility that we had to study the Word as a family always appealed to me a bit more than what I saw going on in other families in the church. Okay. So.
Now I know that I had Joshua in the program. That's your brother. And I think Andy even mentioned in the newsletter that he thinks it's the first time the first two brothers he's had in the show, in the program. How's your brother doing? How's he, they enjoy the experience, and are you finding the experience to be the same for you as well?
I've enjoyed the experience at the school a lot. I believe my brother did as well. As for how he's doing right now, he's currently looking for a work to finally get located at. He hasn't found anything yet, but we're hopeful that he'll find something relatively soon.
Well, you both are very intelligent, and I'm sure our school would be lucky, or congregation would be lucky to have either one of you come and work with them. Let me ask you, how did the West Virginia School of Preaching help you in your development and your growth to be able to, it's one thing to sit in the classroom, but how they help you take what you're learning in the classroom and to be able to share it with others? In what ways do they help you do that?
Well, I have to give most of the credit there to Andy and Terry Jones. Terry Jones helped me to learn, well, most of his classes are homiletics, and so he's the teacher who teaches you how to put together sermons. And that helped a lot because I honestly didn't have much experience with preaching before I went to the school. I delivered a few Wednesday night invitations and one sermon, and I think it only went about 15 minutes. So I didn't have a whole lot of experience with sermon prep. So Terry Jones helped me a lot with that. Andy this year noticed that I was having trouble formulating thoughts on the split second while I was preaching. So he devised a plan to help me to do that better. So he had me basically do an entire sermon on one note card, and I had to do that, and it helped a lot. Certainly allowed me to think more on my feet during that sermon, and I think that alone really helped me in my sermon delivery and preparation.
Now, I know part of the training of the school, you work in chapel, and you're obviously worshiping God in chapel. It's not just work, but what kind of impact did chapel have opportunity to give you to develop even further?
Well, since every student is going to have at least one day a month in which they are delivering the chapel lesson, that means while at the school, even if you don't go and preach outside, which honestly, going around and preaching to different congregations also helped me a lot in my sermon delivery, just getting the practice in almost weekly. But even if you don't do that, I mean, you're preaching at least once a month in chapel, and so you're getting the experience on a monthly basis at least.
And so you move from that, and then eventually they let you go out and preach for area congregations. And what was that experience like, and how was that different from the experience that you had in chapel?
Honestly, chapel's harder because you're among your peers, and so even though they don't necessarily judge you harsher, there's always in the back of your mind the thought that perhaps if you say something wrong, you'll just be made fun of. It hardly ever happens, but so chapel in a way is harder than going out and preaching to various congregations, but they're two very different experiences. I would say that the chapel talk is perhaps a better experience for figuring out how to speak on your toes because, like I said, it's more difficult, and so you're slightly more nervous during chapel talks.
Okay. What are some of the congregations you preach for?
Well, I preach for the Cairo Church of Christ every fourth Sunday. They're a small congregation in, I said it wrong. It's Cairo Church of Christ. So I preach for them every fourth Sunday of the month. Currently, every third Sunday of the month, I'm speaking at Cameron, West Virginia. And I've spoken at a few other congregations here and there. Mostly what I try to do, though, is I like to keep my schedule slightly more open than the other students, so that if they have somewhere that they need to be a Sunday, I can generally pick it up for them. I've done that several times now for a few of them.
Well, I know that when we talked at Future Preaching Training Camp that you were very interested in going to the school and being a part of that. Now that it's almost complete, looking back, would you recommend that to somebody else, and what would you tell them to encourage them to consider going to the West Virginia School of Preaching?
Well, it would very much depend on the person who is thinking about going. Before I recommend it to someone, I would have to know them fairly well so that I would be able to know if I thought that they could handle it, because it's a very intense 2 years of schooling. Now, it is very fun. You do have a lot of, I don't want to say downtime, but you have a lot of group interaction with your fellow students. Even first and second year have a lot of interaction. And I think it's a lot of, because of the stress, we sort of turn to humor as a way to relieve that stress. And so you have a lot of fun with your fellow students while at the school, but it's a very intense 2 years of study. I like to say that it is both simultaneously the 2 years that I've had the most fun at, but also the 2 years that have been the most stressful of my life.
What have been some of your favorite books of the Bible and the classes you studied?
Well, Genesis is always a favorite of mine. Also Job. As for classes, I really enjoyed Andy's song leading, and that's not just because he's the director and I'm trying to butter him up. I actually did enjoy his song leading class. I've enjoyed most of the classes, and the ones I haven't enjoyed as much is mostly because I probably didn't apply myself as much as I should have to it. So.
What kind of themes do you look forward to preaching from based on what you learned at school?
Well, I've always enjoyed apologetics, and Charles Pugh, our apologetics teacher, lays a very solid foundation for that. So I look forward to preaching a lot on apologetics once I leave the school and have time to formulate several arguments for myself. So I look forward to that. I also enjoy preaching on passages that I feel aren't studied enough by people. And I realize that about myself, and so I also try to balance that aspect of it out, the passages people don't study enough, by looking at passages people study a lot, but maybe looking at it from a slightly different standpoint.
Okay. Obviously, going to school full time, I mean, that's pretty stressful and demanding, and you're going and preaching, and I'm sure they keep you really busy, but what kind of things are you interested in outside of ministry? Sometimes people find diversionary subjects a benefit, take their mind off everything they're doing by putting their mind into something else for a little while. What kind of other things interest you?
Well, my dad is what you would call a gamer, and he sort of instilled that in basically all of his children. When you're a gamer, and my dad's a board gamer, so he plays video games like most people do, but our main focus in this particular hobby is that we enjoy board games. And board gaming is a good distraction, if you will. It helps to relieve stress, take your mind off of things. Now, the board games that we like to play are probably different from most board games that you would find in stores and stuff like that. We don't actually play Monopoly a whole lot. That's the sort of go-to game for describing a lot of board games. We're sort of into what you would call non-mainstream board games, or they're actually called hobby board games. So what they are is they're slightly more complicated than your run-of-the-mill board games, but because of that complication, because it's complicated, it helps to relieve stress better than perhaps simpler games would.
Okay.
Because you're fully invested into this game.
What kind of challenges obstacles have you had to face as a part of your training and education?
Well, the main difficulty has been getting myself to actually do my homework. I'm a bit of a procrastinator. I like to put things off until the very last minute just because I can, which hasn't always been a healthy relationship with the schoolwork that I'm required to do, because while I don't do terrible work under pressure, I probably don't do my best work under pressure. And so my main issue has been getting a handle on my procrastination to where it's more manageable than I perhaps had it when I entered the school.
Okay. You mentioned that you did or you're interested in doing some missionary work. Why don't you discuss missionary work and what your interests are along those lines?
Well, I don't have any specific plans concerning mission work yet, but I've always felt that if you can do mission work, you really should consider it because, well, to be blunt, the gospel is not for people of this country only. It's for the entire world. And because of that, I've always felt like I should be participating in mission work somehow. I haven't completely figured out what I want to aim my mission work at, but I know that I want to eventually do mission work.
Okay. I guess that's you're talking about overseas.
Well, I have about 2 different places in mind right now. There's Costa Rica, which is, from what I've heard, very fertile soil right now. There's a lot of Costa Ricans who are looking for the gospel, and so that interests me to perhaps go down there and help out in that country. But I've always also liked the thought of perhaps doing mission work in Japan. But from what I understand, that's also slightly more difficult ground to work with there.
Yeah, we've had missionaries there in the past, and it's I remember reading some of their writings, and they really loved it. But they also talked about how challenging it can be. So, is learning Japanese something that you think maybe you already know Japanese, or is that something that you're going to work on, or you're hoping to use a translator or things like that?
Well, I actually took about 2 years of Japanese while we were being homeschooled. But I've lost most of it, so I really only know how to say hello, and I can say simple sentences sometimes.
Well, maybe you can find you a New Testament in Japanese, and maybe that'll help you keep some sharp, keep that, because if you don't use it, you're going to lose it. So that can always be a challenge. What are your plans on? You're going to graduate here pretty soon. Do you have any plans ironed out for the future? What you're going to be doing?
Nothing solid yet. Although over spring break, I was looking into an internship at the Brookwood Way Church of Christ, and it seems like perhaps that will work out. So
great. In the future, well, let me just ask you this question first. You mentioned homeschooling. What was your homeschooling experience, and how do you think that helped you to be able to do some of the academic things that you're doing today better, or what are your thoughts about homeschooling and how it's benefited you?
The benefit to homeschooling in my life has really been it was less organized than public school, but I feel like that actually helps it because that allows you to alter your schedule, and it really works out well with preacher's kids, which I was. So every time my dad moved, we didn't necessarily have to stop school for more than a week. We could move and then pick it up. So in that way, it helps with moving a lot. But I also feel like because I wasn't tied down to the curriculums in the public schools, I could explore areas that I liked better, more thoroughly. Of course, I still had to do stuff I didn't like. But of course. For instance, I was always interested in biology, so I constantly read ahead in my biology book and just sort of got very familiar with that. So I feel that it allows the students, the families who are using it for the way it should be used, to really focus in on studies that they like, or studies they appreciate better.
All right. Let me ask you this. You have, each of you have different experiences, and I know you a little better than I know some of the other students, but let me ask you, I know the West Virginia School of Preaching does a future preacher training camp of their own. I'm not sure if you attended that or not.
I have not.
Okay. I know you've been with me for the last several summers at Alki Rhodes. For someone that's a young boy, young teenage male, whatever ages, I think it's 13 to 18 years old. What kind of value does going to that kind of school, that camp, how much did you learn doing that? Because I think you went several years to Future. Why don't you tell them a little bit about that experience?
Well, Future Preachers Training Camp was a very interesting experience. It's almost, but not quite, like a miniature school of preaching. It's also very intense because, for starters, you have about 6 classes, and you only have an entire week to learn the information. But other than being intense, it's also a lot of fun because you're spending an entire week with a bunch of other guys your age, and you're all under that extreme stress. And like I said, you sort of turn to the humor as a way to release that stress. So in that way, it's almost like a miniature school of preaching. The main difference is, and while I was going to the Future Preacher Training Camp, I thought that perhaps it would be a good stepping block into schools of preaching, and then I actually went to a school of preaching, and the workload gets a lot more intense once you have 12-page papers that you have to turn in, even though you have 10 weeks to learn the information. It's just, they're 2 different settings, but they are similar in a way.
Now, are you pretty satisfied with the quality of education that you received at the school of preaching?
I have been very satisfied with the quality of education that I have received. Mm-hmm. It's helped me a lot to grow in my understanding of the scriptures.
Now, if I remember right now, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, that's okay, but it seems like I don't know if you enjoyed it or not, but it seems like you're really a very good song leader. Do you still do the lead and singing? Is that something that, you mentioned Andy before, I know he's the director of the school, but it seems like he also taught song leading at the preacher training camp at one point in time, and I don't know if you'd have opportunity to have him for that there, or...
He had stopped doing the song leading at the Alkire Road preaching school before I had got there, but I was there when a few of his students were there, and so I got to hear a few stories of him teaching there. But as for do I still song lead, well, everyone at the school has to song lead, because just like you are required to do a chapel talk every month, about twice a month you're going to be on the schedule to do something else in chapel. I mean, there's 3 things, and you're probably going to do each of them about twice a month.
So it gives you a pretty good rounded experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, what do you see yourself doing 20 years from now?
Hopefully preaching the gospel if not located, at least part-time.
Well, great. Okay, we really appreciate you coming in and being a part of our show, and we wish you all the best, and you're getting ready to graduate. When's graduation?
About 9 Fridays from now. No, I don't have the exact date in my head, sorry.
But you're working there. You're almost there.
Yeah.
So that's good. It's good to see you. Thanks for being a part of the show, coming in.
Thank you.
All right. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for watching our program, and may the Lord bless you. Thanks for watching. Before we close our program today, we'd like to take a moment and review this roadmap to heaven with you, since the matter is so serious. There are many incorrect set of directions out there, and sadly so many people are following them. For example, some people have been given wrong turns. They believe things such as faith only, works only, or grace only. Or some attempt to change the order of the turns, being baptized before they even believe. Some people fail to realize what point they are on the map. Don't even open their Bibles yet, and they think they're saved already. As a person travels in a car or takes a hike, has to follow the proper directions, so we must follow the proper directions to heaven. Let's take a look at the directions on our roadmap to heaven here. You have to look at these passages in your Bible for yourself. We'll just list the steps, the turns on the way. First is to believe, or to have faith. And then number 2, to repent, to turn away from sin. Number 3 is to confess that Jesus is the Son of God. Number 4 is immersion, or to be baptized, which is a burial in water to have your sins washed away. And then you're added to the church by the Lord, not by a group of people or not by giving some kind of testimonial experience or things like that. And then once you're added, you need to serve and worship the Lord faithfully all the days of your life. And the key word's faithfully. You don't waver. And that's very important. We need to keep in mind, too, that in Noah's day there was a big flood, and only people in the ark were saved from the flood. The same is true today. There is no salvation outside the Lord's church. Where are you on the roadmap to heaven? Thanks for watching our program. Please let us know if we can assist you with further information for your journey.